Close this door. Okay, everybody, welcome to Talk Recovery Radio. We're coming to you live on Facebook, and we're coming to you as a replay on 100.5 FM, Vancouver Co-op Radio, and I'm here in studio. No, I'm not in studio. I'm here in an office with Darren Gaylor on Zoom. Hey, Darren, how's it going?
Hailing from my kitchen table once again.
Yes,
pleasure to be here.
Yeah, good to see you. I saw you yesterday.
We did. We were celebrating a friend's recovery clean time.
Yes, 22 years of continuous recovery.
It was awesome.
To all those that say it's impossible or it's whatever, like, guess what? It is. So congratulations to our mutual friend who took 22 years clean in recovery yesterday. Big shout out to that. And we come, we come live, and it was really interesting, the meeting yesterday, because there's this new thing called hybrid meetings. Like, if you would have said 4 years ago, like, let's do a hybrid meeting, everybody would have been like, that's impossible. But it just shows the resilience in the recovery community, that we were really resilient when we used drugs, and it's really cool that we become resilient during COVID-19. And so for those of you that are wondering what we're talking about, so I went to this small meeting last night that was in a park. There was maybe 10 of us, and but we all had our phones on, and if someone didn't have a phone, we shared our phones with them, and the meeting was on Zoom, and a bunch of people were on the Zoom call. And we're all like choreographed, muting our phones when we're talking and then unmuting when they're talking so we can all hear. And like, if you tried to choreograph that with a bunch of people that use drugs, you know what I mean? We would have been like, oh, this is too hard. But because we have to and our lives depend on it, we did it. And like yesterday, there was no script. Like, it just happened. I thought that was super cool.
I'm glad you felt that way, because as the person that was trying to choreograph the dance, it was a little bit stressful.
Yeah, you were the chairperson.
Yeah. But you know what? Like, it's a difficult time having to be told to, all of these, what we've known as fellowship meetings, where we connect with people, can't happen under certain circumstances. And then Zoom came about, which connected us so much. And just like cell phone use, it's got so many benefits of connection, but then, it creates this isolation and this comfort. And we get a lot of people at our meetings that are brand new that can't get to a meeting. And so they can only get there through Zoom. So we wanted to keep that. And people from like down in the States are able to join in, people that we would never see. So it's a weird time. I definitely notice my soul yearning for that, physical human connection. And just along the lines leading into this year's Recovery Day, BC, it's like, it hurts like big time to know that we can't duplicate and do again what we did last year and build on that momentum and have 20,000, 30,000 people on the streets and have a music fest and speakers. But we're not going to come about it like, we're going to do this. We need to connect and like break the law and be socially unacceptable. So we, you guys created this virtual content, and we can still do it and just hope that by next year we're able to get live on the street again.
Yeah, we've got virtual Recovery Day taking place on September 5th. It's our reimagined version of Recovery Day. We got Macklemore and Madchild. And we got Miles Murphy, who's a local musician, and Scissor Fairy, who's going to be the house band. It's going to be a show, Darren. We've got cameras and stages, and everyone's like, oh, it must be so easy. I'm like, no, actually, it's pretty. I'll be working till midnight tonight. Like, just so many moving parts. But it's going to be a great show. So join us. It's a free show. You can watch it on Talk Recovery, no, on Recovery Day's Facebook page, but we will share it on our Talk Recovery page so you can follow and check out what's going on there. And then of course the Recovery Capital Conference is taking place the day before. That is a healthcare and occupational health safety leadership kind of educational conference, but the general public's invited as well, but you can earn continuing education. Why is all this stuff going on? September's Recovery Month, and we're trying to get a petition signed by as many people as possible to pass September as recognized by the federal government as Recovery Month. Why? A lot of people ask, why make June Pride Month? Like, why? And there's lots of reasons why. There's a lot of something happens when you have federal government recognizing a culture, a community, and we people in recovery exist. Whether you're in like a 12-step program, a SMART program, like we have interviewed everybody on this show, all the pathways. There's a post on Twitter the other day that like we don't support recovery pathways. I'm just like, we had people on ayahuasca on the show. Like, I mean, like I feel I've got a pretty good conscience. Like I remember that show, Darren, with ayahuasca. Like I was
I
just
do.
like,
And,
this is great. Like, it's a great show. Like we didn't be like, you're gonna, die if you don't do what Darren and I do. I said, all those haters, like, just keep tagging us and everything. We need the algorithms. You're making my day with the tags. But Recovery Month is to celebrate everyone's pathway. Just to give the idea that recovery, like if you use drugs and you're content, like hats off to you. But if you have an addiction, that recovery is possible. And that's what Recovery Month is all about. And it's just
and,
those
and I,
people that want to recover.
and I just want to make the point. Could you imagine that Recovery Day means only those in a specific defined program of recovery can only come and participate? It's exactly against that to broaden the definition of recovery and oh, you're not allowed if you're in the downtown east side accessing opiate replacement therapy or using a safe injection site. It's for anyone, and to inspire and to celebrate and to remind anyone that there are more options in the current situation that you might think that you can't do any better with. And if that message keeps getting denied or disputed or argued, like we're going to keep spitting that out.
It's almost like if you defend abstinence-based recovery, you're against everything. And it's just like, no, I'm just sticking up for what I believe in, but I support everybody. So don't know why we got to keep talking about this, but it just seems like every week, I had a big rant on my social media a couple of days ago, and it's just like, I had to tell somebody to go somewhere, and it's just like, yeah, you know what, you're not an ally, and this is really serious. So anyway, long story short, we do recover, and Talk Recovery Radio is replayed on SoundCloud, iTunes, on our website. 6 years of shows, hundreds of guests, thousands of listeners. Thank you to everybody that tunes in on the radio, tunes in on YouTube, tunes in on our Facebook page. Lots of people listening on SoundCloud. So thanks to all those people as well. And Darren and I try to come up with different shows every week for you on addiction recovery issues. And shout out to Evan, who helps book our shows. And shout out to Co-op Radio for replaying our shows on the radio during COVID. And the studio almost opened last week, but we decided we didn't want to go into the studio with all those microphones. This is kind of working for us, but then the studio shut down again last week because of the increase in numbers in BC. So, hey, like, I don't know, just go along with masks, wash your hands, like slow down, and, just follow what's going on. This is serious stuff. So Darren, we have two guests today. Who's our first guest and who are we talking recovery with today? Oh, before I move on, I always forget, Talk Recovery Radio is powered by New West Recovery, which is made up of Last Door Recovery Society in Westminster House, Canada's recovery community. So check them out on the internet. And Darren, who are we talking recovery with today?
Yeah. Speaking of anybody can recover, our first guest is Eric McCoy, who's the personification of no matter what life gives you, wherever you end up, that under certain circumstances, anybody can get well, be better, succeed. He's the author of Pain, Failure, and Misery Are the Stepping Stones to Success. Welcome to the Talk Recovery, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I look at the title, Pain, Failure, and Misery Are the Stepping Stones to Success. Through my experience, I go, of course, absolutely. Other people might look at that title and go, but that's also the recipe for addiction and, self-victimization, blaming, excusing the poor, life that they have. I want to get right into that idea. Which one is it? And if it's a little bit of both, what has to happen for it to lead into the success part? How do you take that individual psyche who's self-defeated because of all the failures they've gone through and attain a different perspective?
Yeah, the title of the book, Pain, Failure, and Misery Are the Stepping Stones to Success, is so the book starts out as, well, I guess you could almost call it a true crime story. It tells a glimpse of my story, which I really wanted to put out there because I wanted to show the people that are struggling that, is where I went with my addiction, which was methamphetamine. I was able to pull myself out of it and get myself, through it. I truly, honestly believe that most good things, big things, and great things in life come from pain, come from a form of suffering. All the people out there that live in this life of everything's great, everything's wonderful, there's nothing to work on. And so when I realized that through all of the pain and all the suffering that I went through, the lessons were tremendous. And the book's broken in 3 parts. The first one is Pain, Failure, and Misery, which is my story. And then it goes a step into the unknown, and then it's the stepping stones to success. And I wrote this book as a book of hope to those out there that are shunned by a society that really fails to teach people the most important lessons: self-respect, self-love, self-confidence. And I've worked in the substance abuse industry since 2003. There was glimpses that I kind of left it, but for the most part, that entire time. And, I have always been frustrated with even treatment programs that, I think personally do a disservice to most of our clients, because the reality is the road to recovery, it's vast. There's a lot of different roads to recovery. The 12-step program, most treatment programs, they offer one solution. And if you don't do this, you're not going to make it. And the reality being is that we know that a lot of the people that we're working with, or some of the people, aren't going to do that stuff. We can sit and we can fight with them. We can fight that resistance, and they're going to fail.
Yeah. It's funny. We were just talking about, that sort of natural thing that happens when those that are in the seat to help someone else, whether they do it on purpose or it's a subconscious thing that they're doing, is to sort of, persuade the way they went. And what happens is it stops being about that individual, knowing what they're resisting and sort of trying to meander into what is going to keep them moving ahead.
Yep.
That being said, that I think it might, that step into the unknown, that part where, self-defeated, broken, unwilling, unmotivated, suicidal, all of the dark stuff. oftentimes there's no self-realization or self-actualization that happens for that individual. There has to be an influence, a little nudge, maybe a little force in some senses. And it's often, sadly, the story that those that have your story or like my story just claim luck. They, instead of sitting down in front of a doctor that said you're going to be on Suboxone for the rest of your life, like they sat down in front of a practitioner that learned about some history, that found out what their options and resources are, and said, okay, we're going to help you through a detox, and then here's somewhere that I think you're going to adapt with. Like, is that a big part of the component here? There's that unfortunate sort of luck who you run into in your bottom.
Well, so 2001, I was arrested 4 times in 6 months. I was facing 15 years in prison, and luckily I didn't get that. And I start most of the chapters with a poem, and the reason being is I do implement the importance of writing. I think writing, we've created a lot of brain damage, through our drug use, and so writing and reading, and these kinds of things really help, to for that, like, neuroplasticity, get our brains, working again. And I in the first chapter, which is Heartless Dying Vulture, that's the name of it. I in the poem on that, I say at the very end of it, the first step to freedom is to take the blame, right? And I thought that was really important, because responsibility is the key, and it's not about blaming people. It is about ultimately taking responsibility for ourselves. And the sad part about this is so many of the people out there that really need treatment, that are, with me, I mean, most people don't get arrested post bail, get arrested post bail, get arrested. Most people are like, okay, I'm going to stop, but methamphetamine was so enmeshed in my DNA. And so many of those people out there that are like that, they're not going to get treatment, or they're not getting treatment. And so many of them are lost, that between a rock and a hard place. And so what I've been really, thinking about and contemplating is, how do we reach these people, the ones that are really, out there, and how do they get treatment? You guys are in Canada.
Yeah.
And so you guys have a health system to where people can probably get treatment easier than here, as our president had worked to eliminate the thing that Obama had put together in terms of everybody having insurance. And so now you've even got more people that don't have insurance, aren't able to get into programs. We have federally funded programs that are most specifically based towards opiates. And to get into those programs, it's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of time that's going to take. How many people, are like, oh, I want to get clean, and then they're willing to wait for a month and then go into treatment? It doesn't work like that. When you're ready, we got to go.
It's very similar in Canada. I mean, I think our coverage and things like that is much different. We have a lot of benefits in that sense, but there's a similar gap, in acquiring the type of treatment that's actually, would benefit that individual. It's like, if you've got money, you can go there. If you don't, you're going here. And they're night and day,
right?
And it's sad. We have this backing into our harm reduction that almost doesn't allow an individual out of the harm reduction, right. and given that next phase of, having more options, and now you have the ability to have choice, and you can actually become more self-aware now a little bit more, it's up to you, but there's that bridge that's missing.
Yeah. In the last part of the book, which is the stepping stones to success, there are things that I talk about. One of them is that, the teaching people how to think for themselves, that that we got to stop trying to think through the minds of other people, because it's not really going to work necessarily for us. You know, for me to take that place to where I did fully decide to change, I had to personally realize that I had a problem. It wasn't anything anybody could say to me
Yeah.
that said, "Oh yeah, you got a drug problem. You're a drug addict. You're, this kind of thing." Unless I believed it myself, it's not going to mean anything.
And that being said, I completely agree. I was watching one of your interviews, and you said that you felt the enormous amount of freedom while you were in custody, and it's sort of in that moment where your environment dictated you're not grinding today, you're not obsessed, you know what I mean, like you
Yeah.
have to be stuck in this little box.
Yeah.
And therefore allowing that sort of thinking to become.
Yeah.
But that would mean that before that you probably shouldn't have been allowed to think for yourself. You know what I mean? And that's sort of that process where, like, you hear people defending the right for people that are under the influence, in the darkness, in the grind, in the that cyclical part of addiction, and they have every right to continue to do what they do. So let's offer them harm reduction. Let's offer them that. But I know it, for me, it sounds like you needed a force outside of yourself to put you somewhere where you weren't going to go yourself. And from that point on, am I right? Is that?
No, 100%. Yes, you definitely need, I mean, even with the 12-step program, I'm not a 12-step person. But, when I look at, okay, what are the things that people get within the 12-step program that I have in my life? And one is a support network, having people that I can talk to, realizing too that my brain isn't always, may have, some irrational thinking or irrational thoughts that I can run by people. And that is very, very important. And yes, when I was in custody, I felt more freedom than I'd felt in my entire life. And I was in custody. And so I realized that freedom comes from within, doesn't come from anything external, and most of that came from responsibility. Once I basically, what, I'm here because of me. I was illegally searched. I had weed planted on me. I mean, there were legitimate reasons I could blame, right?
Right.
But I also came
You
to
were
realize,
also on crystal meth at the time too.
yeah, no, yeah, definitely.
You're a 12-step person. How, for our viewers and listeners, what was your recovery journey? What did you do? Did you go to CBT? Did you go to SMART? Like, do you mind sharing that with us?
So I did almost a year in custody, and I had that amount of time clean when I left. I was scared because my mind was clear. I was happy. I was feeling great. I didn't want to leave because I didn't know what I was going to do when I got out. I'd never done well with that. I did leave there and I went straight into a program, and I'd been through my first rehab at 16. I'd been through numerous programs, and I made a decision that, I'm going to stay in this rehab for a year. And then I stayed, even additionally in a sober living. And then I started going to school and I was working and, all of these types of things. And so, but really the first step to it all was making that decision myself. And this is the hardest thing for a lot of people, is to how do you get to that place where you say, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to fight this. And I learned that, no matter where you've been or what you've done, you can do anything you want if you're willing to fight for it. And part of, for the listeners out there, especially those that are struggling, I want them to know, that there are people that can help. They can always, reach out to me and I'll talk to people anytime, anywhere, and there are good people out there that you can reach out to that can be a support. I put a post on Facebook, recently, and I said, for all of you out there struggling with drugs, I love you. Because I doubt you hear that very often.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, sometimes they just need a hug, and just that conversation, not that, this is what's wrong with you. And, we have this saying, what's right with you, even at your bottom, at your lowest, whatever you want to call it. It's like everybody's got some strengths in them. And how do you focus on that? Because I remember just even going through some 12 step work. It's like I can really see everything that's wrong with me, but like I had to have like this like I couldn't see anything good with me, and that's addiction. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's like, oh, drugs. It's like it's more than that. It's like, I could come up with a list of what's wrong with me, but
Mhm.
I couldn't come up with a sentence
Yeah.
on what's good with me, and then I would see other people doing the same thing, and I was like, wow, like this is a real thing. Like everybody I'm
Yeah.
around thinks
I
this.
think I think focusing on strengths is important,
It's
I
good
think,
for you.
yeah.
But we're not doing that. Like you don't see that in an overdose awareness campaign.
You don't.
We don't see that. And I'm not too sure why, but there's this conversation out there about pathways to recovery. I'm glad that that we're talking to somebody right now that's got a different pathway, and I respect that and so forth. So there's this conversation of different pathways. So you said you were in treatment since you were 16. There's a conversation, a tweet going on right now, getting lots of shares up here in Canada. Do treatment attempts fail the patient, or does the patient fail the treatment attempts? It's time to change treatment.
I
And
personally think that in most cases the treatment fails the client.
okay, so I want to
Because
touch on that then. So how about this? So what, like, I'm trying to come up with, so in Portugal, they have this, so there's a commission of drug dissuasion. If you're using substances problematically, and even if you're just smoking a joint, you get called in, and it's like a quasi jury made up of doctors and psychiatrists, and they actually dissuade you from using drugs. And if you have a problem and you come back, you start to get tics, and eventually they persuade you to go to treatment. But this is what they do. Like they literally like, and I sat there. I'm doing a film on it. This is the 12-step program. This is the SMART program. This is where you're going to go plant for 2 years. It's a therapeutic community. This is a low barrier where you can still use drugs, but like we're trying to get you to stop. And there's no fighting. It's just like you pick and you choose, right? So like where we come from, treatment's funded and all that. Why are there so many 12-step programs? There's a non-12-step program where you can still use drugs, and it's complete harm reduction wellness wheel. They have empty beds. It's kind of one of those
well,
things.
the 12-step program, and I'll say this, the 12-step program was the foundation for me.
Yeah.
And what I learned through this process was that, after I got out of custody, I went in treatment. We were required to go to 12-step meetings, and it became a great foundation for me.
Yeah.
I reached a place where I felt it became a disservice to me. And and I don't know how programs are out there, but so many programs here in California where I live are really negative. They they don't work with the new. I mean, if you're new, shut your mouth and
Oh, I hate
open your
that.
ears,
I hate that. Yeah, I
and
hate that. Yeah.
yeah, and I always felt, because I worked so much on my self-esteem, and learning to care about myself. I started feeling that it was working against me. Now, for those that are really heavily involved in the 12-step program, you can't stop there though, because that's the other factor, is that so many people think all you have to do is get a sponsor, work steps, go to meetings, and you're fine.
That's
No,
not treatment.
there's so much more to it, and
Treatment.
so that, that's something I really, my book is really designed as, at the end of a lot of the chapters, questions to consider. It's about making it your own. It's not about, me telling you what you have to do, need to, or should do. It's about ideas. I put out ideas. I met with Dr. Drew not that long ago, and he asked me the question. He goes, "So what's the solution?" Right? And I was thinking, like, I don't know, because the reality is that a solution for you may not be my solution. I have ideas, and that's what I'm really, I have a podcast that I do, and it's called Recovering Through Highness. And it's, based on the concept that everything that I'm looking for today is no different than I was looking for when I was getting loaded, which is to get high. Highness is not a property of drugs. It's a property of people. We have that ability within us to get high. And, I did one that was like, let's get high. And at the end of it, I went through this crazy laughing episode, and to the point where my head was red, and I got to the end of it and I literally felt so high, but a natural high,
Natural dopamine.
What's that?
The natural dopamine rush,
Absolutely.
that thing that we essentially change in our brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a process back. Like that is part of the recovery process that because you don't see it, you don't really feel it, and it has to be part of the pursuit of doing the things in your life that provide that natural rush and get your brain firing again. Like finally they proved that our brain, the cells can build again, while we learn, because it was just like, you're killing your brain cells every time you use drugs. And it's just like, I mean, you get clean and you think I'm just going to have to live the rest of my life as dumb as I was, like, but they've proven that as you learn, as you study, as you read, like you said at the top of the show, and how much of that is encompassed more than, like you said, just get a sponsor, do the steps. Like it is a whole life area approach that I think gets lost in these specific little programs, because hey, if you tell me this is all I got to do, I guarantee you that's all I'm going to do.
Exactly.
And bare minimum sometimes.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's sad. Now we don't have a lot more time, but I wanted to get on, because you advocated something I read of our youth. And speaking of the demographic that, naturally don't listen, want to prove their independence, all that sort of thing. And you can't change the way they think, but yet as adults, as parents, like that's sort of our job a little bit too. How do we get to the youth? How do we educate? How do we persuade? How do we, scare?
Educate. And again, here in California, we have this whole set of families, these, those, what do we call those moms that are just, protecting over the kids, and I personally think that, our school system does not have, the programs to educate. I'm a firm believer in education and self-responsibility, and you teach people, because we always had in California, back in Nancy Reagan, just say no, right? But that failed to consider the mind's desire to want to understand, just say no. But there was nothing beyond that. And so I really think that is an important thing. We always say in California, everybody says in California, oh, it's the parents' responsibility, right? Well, what if you got messed up parents? Yeah. What if you got parents getting high? Yeah. And so, that's the stuff that, we don't want it. We don't want to talk about sex in our school system. They're too young, or we don't want to talk about drugs, but I believe personally that we need to do it in a way that is honest with kids. They'll catch you on lies, just to go in and say drugs are bad, and then you get people that have used drugs and they're like, what are you talking about? They're great. We need to go in, I think personally, with, I love to get high, but highness comes from within. I don't get high. And that'll open the door for people to listen, if I go in with that mentality.
Yeah. Well, like you say, I've always thought it should be a mandatory class, like take math out. I don't remember the last time.
Exactly.
But I mean, but not like, a police officer coming in with a case of drug samples, and, and that kind of education. But
I wanted to steal the suitcase.
That's it. I was like, is that real? But I mean, a class on that part, like, because you can't avoid pain, failure, misery, trauma. You don't get to control that. That's
pain's inevitable.
And we're born to be able to withstand it, but we grow ourselves out of it. We ignorantly, protect ourselves from it, or think it's a negative thing. And I think it should be like education on resiliency and different ways of coping when life, and knowing that drugs are out there and available and are going to give you temporary relief. They're going to help, but anyways.
Well, it does, and that's where people think that the things I'd mentioned, learning self-respect, self-confidence, all these things. Well, drugs temporarily give that to people, at least in what they believe, but eventually it stops working. And that's the other important thing I think for people to understand, is that they do stop working.
That's
and
right.
Adaptation level theory, anytime you use a drug for an extended period of time, your body will adapt to where you'll no longer get pleasure from it. And
Eric McCoy, author of Pain, Failure, and Misery Are the Stepping Stones to Success. I'm sure you could get that on your website, recoveryecosystem.net.
Yeah, you can get on there. You can get it on Amazon. It's actually in all formats. I even did an audio version.
Using your own voice, I hope.
Yeah, I did it myself.
Nice. Thanks for being on the show. We hope to have you again in the future.
This is great. I really appreciate it. I love this conversation. Please, I'd love to come back.
Thanks for joining us.
This is Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. If you're tuned into the radio, we are also on Facebook Live. For those of you viewing right now, thank you for joining in. And time for
Kia in the house. Hi, Kia.
Hey guys.
Hey, perfect. You can hear us. Hello, welcome to the show, Kia. Super excited to have you here. Kia is going to be one of the panel leaders for the panel participants for the Recovery Capital Conference that's coming up next Friday on September 4th. And the conversation is about recovery pathways for the Indigenous community, people of color, and what those pathways look like, and what the journey was like. And so we really appreciate your courage for doing that next week. Kia also just celebrated a milestone. If Kia wants to share a little bit of what that's all about.
Absolutely. Yes, I just took my 1 year a few days ago. So that was a wonderful, it's hard for me just to celebrate that in one day, because it's not just like one day you get to that place. And it definitely took this whole last year to be able to really reap the benefits of not using for a whole year. So yeah, it's pretty special. I got to spend it with my family on the island. And then I came back on my actual clean day and went to a meeting here in New West and got to celebrate with my recovery family. So that was awesome.
So you say benefits, top three. What are some of the top three benefits from not using in your life anyway?
I think number one is connection to people again. I had lost the connection to people again, like even people I'd known for many years. I was not able to be honest with them. I was not able to be real. I was not able to feel. So I guess number two is probably feelings, both good and bad, just having them again, knowing what emotions were. And number three for me is probably the ability to write again. So I do like to write music and poetry, and especially through the last probably 5-7 years of my addiction, I just completely cut that tool. I guess at one point it was a tool. It was a coping mechanism that helped me for a long time until it didn't help anymore, because it wasn't actually getting me to a solution. It was just another Band-Aid to kind of manage feelings. And but now, yeah, the floodgates are kind of open again, and I can write again, which is just such a pleasure.
And that's writing music. He is a singer, a songwriter, and that's one of the things that she'll be doing at the conference and at Recovery Day. I just remembered you're also going to be doing a song at Recovery Day. We'll talk about that a bit more. What, without doing the entire panel that you're going to be doing next week, is this your first attempt at recovery? Have you been in and out of recovery? And what is, the difference of somebody, a person of color in this community trying to find recovery and so forth?
Well, this was my first real attempt at recovery. So I would say that I probably had been a user for about 25 years. And at some points, I think maybe 15 years ago, I did go to detox and lasted for a week and then immediately went back to using. I tried a 30-day program in Victoria 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, and also got kicked out of that program for being too angry and for just helping other people and not doing my own work, and also for wanting to still do music, not understanding that I actually needed to stop living in that life and with those people that were toxic. But what brought me to recovery this time was my work. Actually, when I came to treatment, I still didn't think I was an addict. I was just going for work, and that was what I needed to do. And I'm going to have a little break from using, and then I'm going to be fine. And even in my mind, it was, oh, you're going to be on medical monitoring for 3 years. But I was like, okay, as soon as those 3 years are done, I'll be back to using and doing what I want. I'll do what I need to do for work, right? So, but it took a few months, but it really shifted for me when I realized, I was like, oh, this is actually going to lead me to a real solution in my life for the first time. Whereas in those 20 years, I'd been in and out of mental institutions. I'd had various breakdowns. I've seen every doctor that you could imagine, and nothing was able to get me past my trauma and my emotion and the reasons that I used. And nobody had ever really even explained the reasons why I used until I came to this community in New West and went to treatment and started working the steps. And I found that once I got to know myself, I was able to get a better picture of everything. And that kind of leads into, being a person of color. I never really associated how much systemic racism played a part of my reasons why I used. If I think about it, it was really the reason why I felt like I didn't belong. Well, I didn't belong. I was the only Black person. I grew up in Victoria at a high school of 1,500 people. I was the only person of color till one other like half Black girl came along, and it was like, oh, there's the ballerina girl and the band girl, right? There was nothing. And, even to the point that we moved from England because my mom is white and my dad is Black. And in England in the early 80s, there was a lot of immigration from India, and my parents really felt the brunt of that racism. But they took us to the other side of the world where we had no connection to any family and moved us to Edmonton, where once again in the early 80s, we were the only Black family. I was the only Black kid in school. I was removed from all of my family. So I didn't grow up with cousins or grandparents. And that, I didn't really realize until I started working the steps on what a big impact that had, that always wanting to belong. And that started in high school with, lying to fit in. Oh yeah, my parents have a cabin here too. We were a middle-class family. I was not getting a Beamer for my 60th birthday. And that just kind of led to this. I talk about it. That assimilation process. And, even with the most current sort of Black Lives Matter movement and the kind of resurgence from George Floyd and everything, I was always that person that didn't want to speak up. I didn't want to rock the boat. I don't want to have a voice as a Black person. I'm like, you're going to upset the white people. Like, let's just not say anything and stay in your own lane. And that had always been my default mechanism for how I handled racism. I just pretended it didn't exist. Like, I remember when I went to New York the first time and I met one of my aunts who raised an entire family in the Bronx as a school teacher. 2 of her husbands had been killed by violence, gunshot. And she was meeting me for the first time at like 25 years old. And she said to me, honestly, Kia, is there racism where you live? And I said to her, I'm like, not really against Black people. There's not enough of us. That was my answer to her. And of course there was racism, but I didn't even identify it. And I said, well, maybe if you're Indigenous, that's kind of what the racism looks like that you're talking about here. But on that trip, I felt what it was like to go into the grocery stores in Manhattan versus in Brooklyn as a Black person. I felt it's like, whoa, this is still a real thing there. And was very much, that was in, well, there was still the Twin Towers were still there. So we're going back, right?
And you wrote a song and that you're going to perform at the conference and at Recovery Day. We're really looking forward to hearing that song performed. And there also, you've got lots of time at the conference to talk about your personal experiences and so forth. Are you nervous?
Not so much. To be honest though, when Todd Ware, the facilitator, asked me to write a spoken word piece to kind of introduce this panel, I thought he wanted me to write a recovery piece. And I was like, yeah, no problem. No, like, sure, I can do that with my eyes closed. And then when he sat down and said, actually, this is the panel. And I was like, oh man, that's like a way bigger piece of pie. Like that's a huge take. But
I'm really grateful. I'm privy. I've heard it, and
it's pretty good.
Said, hey, do you think this could be performed? And I was just like, yeah, like that's super powerful. You've got some amazing talent. So that's going to be on September 4th, the conference. You go to recoverycapitalconference.com and you can hear Kia's full story at the conference. And then Recovery Day is on September 5th and 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. streamed live for free on Facebook. You'll be with Macklemore and Mad Child,
yay,
Murphy, and lots of other entertaining. It's weird having entertainment and music and celebrations in the middle of the worst overdose month, the last 3 months. But to everyone out there, like, we can't forget to celebrate our recovery milestones. Like, it's a big deal that you took a year a couple days ago, and our first guest says we need to educate. We need to educate and we need to inspire. We need to inspire people that this, like, you can do what Kia is doing and so forth. I want to go back to, in the middle of this interview, you said something that I want to touch on, actually, and we've got some time actually to talk about it. I had no idea that your work sent you to rehab, and I had no idea that you're being monitored and so forth. There's a huge push out there where in the occupational health world, like, everybody gets really mixed in. It's like people aren't forced to get abstinence. Like people aren't forced to do it, with a gun to their head, if they enter a treatment center that's funded by the government. You have a choice. You can go to whichever you want, and these people do this, and these people do that, and this is male, this is female, this is smoking, this is non-smoking. But in the world of occupational health, there's something much bigger than all these nonprofit charities. It's like the Health and Safety Act of Canada, to make sure the guy running the crane, 850 stories up in the air, isn't smoking crystal meth. And I say that because I know 2 crane operators that smoked crystal meth up there in their little crane home, right? And they had to go to treatment, and the requirement was abstinence. So I'm assuming you work in an environment, you don't have to tell us where there's some health and safety involved.
Absolutely. Well, I don't mind sharing about it. I work with youth corrections. So absolutely, this is full safety position. And, my work as a musician is what got me into that work, because I would go in and make songs with the kids. And then that led to me getting hired. Now you're working in, the most vulnerable population, and most of them are, unfortunately, are using. And so I was constantly being re-triggered, re-traumatized every day that I'm at work, and then going home and using as a way to cope with what I'm dealing with and what I'm experiencing with the youth. But yeah, there's no way that you can walk in both worlds, using and then being an example for youth. And I know when you were speaking with Eric about the education piece that comes, it's like, yeah, the kids are drawn to me because I can rap. There's not a lot of people walking around the jail that want to freestyle with them and like be like, yo, let's get down. They're like, nobody's gonna fuck with Miss Kadiri. They're like, I got serious cred in that sense. But you know, there's that piece. It's like they are drawn to me because I was real. They're drawn to me because I would talk about addiction in my raps with them. And I would talk to them about, well, this is something that we can, I'm not going to tell you, you can't tell your story in your raps, because I think that that is the most important thing. And so through that conversation, it's like leading by example. But if the example I'm leading is like, you can write about what you need to do and then you go home and you get high, that's not a great example. So yes,
So
my work.
do you think it's against your human rights to be monitored, or are you grateful that you're being monitored?
I'm grateful that I'm being monitored. I think that it works as a, you know, of course I didn't feel that way at the beginning, but it does have another level of accountability. Again, I can get another job. If I don't want to work in that job, I don't have to be monitored, right? It's just like, if I want to work in this field that I've chosen to work in and I want to be held accountable, well, then these are the things that I need to do. I think that it's my responsibility to own, that's the immense piece. It's like, I'm going to own my side. I did these things. I know that these things are wrong. I endangered people in the process of doing that. And this is what I need to do to not do that in the future, at least for a temporary measure. So
the language of someone who's just simply taking responsibility, it's a different language than somebody who's, you know, not quite there yet and not quite ready to take that.
And I wouldn't have gotten there throughout this process, right?
Yeah, it's a symptom of the success. In whatever pathway you take, you hope that the end result is just that language that you just spoke right there. It's amazing. It's amazing that we have so much difficulty getting somebody from that to that.
Yeah, well, and I also think, you know, again, it's a different situation if you don't want to work in that field. You know, maybe I would feel different about you know, is making medical monitoring mandatory for everybody, then yeah, I think that's crossing a line. I don't think that is, you know,
I get it. Yeah.
I don't think that that's the solution, although I do believe for myself personally that it is very helpful. You know, there's times where you might have a using thought where that is the thing that stops you, because it's like, oh, wait a second, you know, I don't want to get caught. And unfortunately, in that early recovery, I think that the more measures of accountability I can have, the stronger it makes my foundation.
So that being said, I'm trying to come up with a question that's pertinent to your experience being a person of color, being a person in recovery, and all these, you know, different labels that so many people have and juggle when they're dealing with one issue at a time, or not wanting to deal with another issue at another time. Because it would be nice if, you know, specific ethnicities dealing with addiction all got brought into a very ethnic specific program, right? That would be convenient, I guess, as far as relatability, understanding, all of that. It doesn't happen that way. You sort of ended up wherever you ended up, however, through somebody's referral, you know what I mean? And now the potential that you're sitting in front of a counselor or a therapist or a doctor that should be understanding your genealogy, understanding, you know, traumas through family and society, everything that you've dealt with to that point, they should be understanding, but may not relate to it whatsoever. And I'm just speaking from someone of a different ethnic. I'm a white guy, right? And so if I'm sitting in a counselor's position, I'm probably going to step back at touching that stuff, because I'm going to, you know, try to tread carefully. How does a counselor hold you accountable for taking responsibility? Okay, systemic racism, like that sort of topic and that reality. How do they help you in how you have to take responsibility even in that?
Well, I think a good counselor, you know, the women that I worked with, they address the addiction first, right? So if we just meet on that same level, we're all addicts, let's just start there, and we can build on the other layers. And my counselor was amazing in the sense where she said, Kia, your life is like a movie, and I'm fixated. I want to sit and watch it. It's just like, but it's not healthy in early recovery to unpack all of that trauma all at once. So we're going to start by stop using, and then we're going to look at those treating the addiction piece first, and then bringing in the support that you may need to deal with other associated trauma. And so I think, and we talk about that in trauma-informed practice, I'm not going to obviously try and counsel somebody that is of a different experience to my own without treading lightly, like you said, right? And also just like, leaving it up to them to tell their story, not telling them what their story is. Oh, you're Black, and so obviously you've experienced racism. Oh, you're gay, and so obviously you've experienced homophobia. No, you allow that conversation to be brought about naturally. And I think that, this is a new kind of level that we are really introducing in. Like, that's one thing I'm excited about with the panel, is this like, this is not something that we're going to be able to fix in a conversation or with one law getting changed, because this is ingrained deep into the way that we have all been raised, and everything that we see in the media, everything that's in all these levels of education and institutions. And so it just starts by having the conversation and really like listening, but it also is like recognizing our own biases. So the fact that you can even say, you know what, I know I'm a white man of privilege, I have white privilege, and this is what it looks like, that is more of a willingness demonstrated that most people in my community have ever seen. And that's enough for us right now. So just own your part, and then we're good. Like, we can move forward, because we know that there's racism, and we know that everybody has something. We all look at each other in a different way. And so it's just about being able to get honest with that and say,
and it's that difficulty of, like, whether it's systemic racism, sexual abuse, all of that sort of like, maybe childhood situations that, you had no support, no help, you know what I mean? And as a natural result of experiencing something like that, there is a victimization of self. And I mean, from everything, you can read and, like, to get well from that, there has to be a separation of victimization and sort of empowerment and resiliency. Mm-hmm. And unless you're sitting across from somebody who, appears or is visibly understanding, is it okay that we talk? Is it okay? Is it just, like, as you said, first a little bit of self-disclosure from the individual that cannot relate? Is that?
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely we can talk. That's the only way that we're going to move forward in these situations. But it is a matter of, I really look to the Indigenous community as kind of pillars of not necessarily being the victim in these situations. I watched a really great documentary on human trafficking that was actually put up through the government websites right now. And one of the things that made it so great is that the people that they chose to speak are speaking from a survival point of view. They're not speaking from a victim point of view. And even though the horrible things have happened to them in their life, they're able to say, but here I am now, and I'm a survivor, and let's talk about what got me to that place. And from looking at the conversation from that other side, we can look back and say, these are some of the signs that you can look for. If you're noticing somebody being racially profiled, if you notice, and one of the first things it says to them is, you don't go up to them and say, hey, you're a victim of human trafficking, right? That's maybe not the jump off spot, but recognizing it yourself and then changing your mind frame when you begin the conversation is sort of all, again, that's asked for, because people will pick up on those subtleties, right? So if you're engaging in a conversation about racism with somebody, a person of color, and you're not quite sure how to start the conversation, start it like that. I really like to know more, but I don't know how to start this conversation, right? Yeah. And then let that be the lead.
I'm so excited that you're a part of this panel, and that this is a part of the discussion. Yeah, your
Me
voice.
too. It's such an honor.
Cool.
I'm so excited. I was so excited to such a, like last year I was at this conference and I thought it was one of the best parts of my treatment. I loved watching your documentary on Portugal. I was like, told everybody, I'm like, I just saw the most amazing, people. I've met all the amazing people that are working towards finding solutions and recovery and having honest conversations. And so
Now you're part of that. You're one of the people.
Trying.
Yeah, the Recovery Capital Conference, September 4th. We're going overtime here, so we're gonna get cut. So thanks for joining us, Kia. Really appreciate it. And then don't forget that she'll be live on the Recovery Day stage, which is virtual this year on September 5th. Go to facebook.com/recovery day for the stream, 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. And Darren over there is going to be emceeing Recovery Day. I'll be the person with the headphones in the back, kind of directing from behind the scenes. We're going to have a great time of craziness. Thanks for being on the show, Darren. Good to see you. See you next Thursday. Oh, no, we're off for a couple of weeks, so we'll be doing replays for a couple of weeks. Thanks a lot, Kia. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Giuseppe. Bye, Darren.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.